you so much for coming today. Welcome to the Celtic Junction Arts Center. I'm Brian Miller. I'm the director of the Owen McKiernan Library, and we are here today to celebrate the history of an amazing club that used to be right here in the Twin Cities, the Irish American Club of the Twin Cities. So I have had the privilege of meeting a number of people that were active in the club going way back to the 40s when the club got started. And I just wanted to start by acknowledging a few of the people that I've talked to over the last year as I've been putting this history together. And I thought I would start with Vince Morin and sort of dedicate this whole talk to Vince. Vince passed away last month, and it was really an honor to meet him last September when his sons, Paul and Tim, took me over to meet him. And he had stories about the club, and of course, Vince's wife, Sis McDonough, was a huge part of the club, way back to getting the whole thing started. So thanks to Vince, and a huge thanks to Paul and Tim for that. And of course, a huge thanks to handsome Marty Mchugh. They're playing his box in his house. Marty, like I said, was my introduction to the Irish American Club was meeting Marty when I first moved down here in 1998 and was way too energetic. A kid from northern Minnesota dying to get into Irish music, and Marty was so welcoming to me, like he's been so welcoming to people for decades. It's amazing. So thanks, Marty. Still centuries. Marty Hand. And Marty's chat that he had a few years ago with Dahi Sproul, we did this oral history recording, that was very helpful in putting this talk together. And then I have to thank this gang as well. That's Dennis D and Pat Mahoney D. They're both sitting in the front row today. And Bridie Conroy Capping is in the front row as well. And then their friends that aren't here today, I don't think, Mickey Long and Mary Long. And they were all part of the club in the early days, and they still get together. And the one that's missing is Sullivan. They still get together on a regular basis for the odd luncheon. And they were really nice and invited me along to their luncheon last month. And it was a great time to chat about the club and remember the history. And then I had to do an extra mission to track down Con at his home in Coon Rapids. And I wish Con could have been here today. If you don't already know Con, he's a great character, and we had a wonderful chat. So I got to get everybody's county straight too. So we have, so Dennis is here today from Kerry, Con's from Kerry, Pat's parents are from Kerry, yes, and then Bridie's from Galway, right? Yes, very good, very good. And then Sis McDonough, who's the mother, the wife of Vince, her people were from Galway as well.
And Mary Long, who was on the right
yeah.
there, married to Mike Long.
Yes.
She's from Mayo.
Right. So Mayo's represented. Marty's from Roscommon. Woo!
Yep.
And the Malone, where were the Malones from?
Kerry.
Kerry. Mark Malone, as I see in the front row. Anyway, I just thanks so much for opening your homes and your friendship to me. I also got to talk to Henry Scanlon, who I don't think is here today, but Henry's brother, Tom. People know the Dubliner, Tom Scanlon's brother, Henry, also from Kerry, just down the road from some of these other folks. And he was a great chat. Jim and Mary Curtin, I didn't get to really meet them in person, but they on the internet, they corresponded a bit and shared some photos and were helpful. And then the other big one, and I'm glad that Charlie and Ann and Tom Dahill are all here because they did a wonderful thing in the late 70s and went and sought out some of the older musicians like Patty Hill that were around town and actually made recordings of them, of Patty chatting and John Curtin chatting, and so that's been really helpful. And thanks, Charlie, for bringing that in the one day, those recordings you made. It's been super helpful. So there have been Irish social clubs in the Twin Cities going way back, and my other major source for this research has been newspaper archives. And if you look at them, they go way back into the 1800s, Irish social clubs in the Twin Cities. Some of them are even called the Irish American Club. Sometimes there were clubs called the Shamrock Club. There was a club called the Shamrock Club that lasted a long time. But it's just to show this continuity going way back into time of these kind of clubs. These are some newspaper bits from the 20s. There was an Irish American club based in Minneapolis for a while that had things at the Royal Arcanum Hall. This guy, P.J. Doran, I don't know if anybody recognizes that name. He seems to be a big mover and shaker back in the 20s with the Shamrock Club and with what was that called, the Irish American Club back then. Another mover and shaker in that older Minneapolis Irish American Club was a man named Michael McNeve. If you know Mary McNeve, Mary's grandpa, Michael McNeve, turns up in some of these articles from way back to the 20s. It's kind of amazing the continuity. And then if you look, that's an article from the 30s there, or the ad for the St. Patrick's Dance, Twin Cities Shamrock Club at the St. Paul Coliseum, and modern music by Frank Cottier's Coliseum Orchestra, Irish music by Mike Sullivan's Champions. And this is a different Mike Sullivan than the Kerry Sullivans, but I know Marty remembers this Mike Sullivan, and other people I've talked to remember. We'll call him old Mike Sullivan, Mike Sullivan that was here back playing fiddle in the 20s. And he used to play on the radio with Patrick Linehan, who played the uilleann pipes. And Tom Dahill here has Pat Linehan's uilleann pipes now and still plays them in town. It's amazing. And Mike Sullivan, I think, even maybe played for some of the dances in the early Irish American Club that people here would have been involved in. So going up through the 30s into the 40s, McDonoughs start appearing, including Sis, Margaret McDonough there. She's right in the middle of that, on the left there. That's Sis. Yeah, and so the International Institute started doing the Festival of Nations, I think in 32 or 34, and they would have an Irish contingent at the Festival of Nations. And Sis was involved in that in the early days. So that photo, the Morin family had that amazing photo. You can see Sis in the front row, and isn't that amazing? God, that's amazing. And then this is another Festival of Nations group, and that has Sis in it. And we think that's Ronnie too. Sis, is that Sis's cousin or sister?
Yeah, Ronnie Goodman.
Okay. I guess sorry, I got the wrong name on it, but. Yeah, the one kind of peeking her head out in the middle, is it, or the one on the left?
The fourth one from the left.
Fourth one in, yeah. And is her cousin or sister? Cousin, great. And I'd love to know who the box player and the fiddle player is, but we're not sure who they are. But so this is just to show that there were people like Sis that were involved going way back. This is another picture here that predates the Irish American Club that we're going to talk about today, and this is a whole load of McDonoughs. This again comes from the Morin family. Pat McDonough from Carrow, right? He was the one that came, the father. And then Margaret and Martin, Kathleen and Frank are doing a step dance. It's kind of hard to see in that picture. And John McDonough, and I don't know if Gertie, okay. That's fantastic. So that was for an International Institute thing. Maybe they were going to go dance at the Festival of Nations, or maybe it was another event during the year. Anyhow, one more here that kind of just right before the club started. We think that the club got going in later in 1948, but this is a picture of three people that were present in the early days of the Irish American Club. Tony Doherty and his daughter Margaret Doherty and Mike Nash. They were all from Cedar Lake Township down by Savage, south of the Twin Cities, and they had just moved into town. Marty remembers playing with Mike Nash, I know for sure. And they're getting ready for a St. Patrick's Day event put on by the Hibernians here in March of '48. And I could play it. We actually amazingly found a recording of Tony Doherty and Marge playing, and this is a tune that he wrote. Maybe I'll play. What will I play? Polly Milking the Cow. Maybe this is him playing fiddle. If this will come through. So both those guys were both from that Cedar Lake township area down by Savage, south of the Twin Cities, and they grew up on the farm, and they were like third generation Irish, like their grandparents were the ones that came over. And another like that was Mike Hughes, that used to also play fiddle in the early days of the club. That's Mike Hughes down there on the lower left. He was from Benson, Minnesota, or out, I can't remember the other names of little towns out there, but, what was it?
Kirkhoven.
Kirkhoven, okay, yeah. And was it Clontarf is out there too? Is that the same area?
Never heard of that.
Can't remember. Anyway, he was another one that was definitely, was not born in Ireland, but came into the cities and got involved. These are some of the early people that helped start the club. Pat Curtin and his brother John from Clare. Somebody, I forget who it was, one of the Morans told me that John rented the hall, the first hall, when they had the first dance. And then Patrick Hill, born in 1900 in County Tipperary, who, you know, kind of amazing, fought in the Irish War of Independence and in the Irish Civil War before coming over to the United States. You know, we're marking this year the 100-year anniversary of the Irish state in 1922, and you know, he was this incredible link to that revolutionary era in Ireland. And then Sis McDonough, that we've already mentioned, that was born here in the Twin Cities, I believe, right? But parents from County Galway. Another one that kind of was around, I don't know if he had much in starting the club or anything, but Ed Linehan was a piper and kind of a character that used to put on a kilt and kind of like represent Irishness every St. Patrick's Day around town. And he was doing that back in the 20s and was still doing it in the 60s. So he appears here and there as kind of somebody that was around for a long time. And then Tony Doherty and Mike Nash were part of the club as well.
Oh, there's the Sullivan.
There's the Sullivans. So, you know, people were coming over. I think it's just interesting to think of the change, you know, coming from a farm like the Sullivans there near Kenmare in County Kerry. So two brothers from that family came over, you know, from this rural farm life to the big city here, and they actually lived in Minneapolis. And then Marty Mchugh over there. Is one of your brothers in that photo, Marty?
Yes.
Is Mike in that photo? I was trying to remember.
No.
No, it's not Mike. I was hoping, I couldn't remember which brothers were in the photo, but I put that up because I know Marty's brother Mike was in England first. Right.
My brother was in-laws, yes.
Yeah, and he met, that's where he met Mike McNamara, right, from Limerick?
Yeah.
In England, and then McNamara and Mike Mchugh both came over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it,
He's not in it.
maybe Con's not, maybe that was after he ran off. But,
No, but his brother Mike.
oh, Mike is in there.
In the white shirt
Okay.
is there, but anyway.
Yeah, so just to think, you know, the journey of coming over from rural area, or you know, there were so many Irish in those years after World War II that went to England looking for work, and then, you know, maybe moved from there onto America. Was it Pat? You were telling me maybe that the Sullivans, the ones on the farm there on the left, that the mother really didn't want them to go to England. Was very adamant that they didn't go to England, so she was happy. She was okay that they went over to the States. But you know, these people were coming over on boats. There seems to have been a particular wave in 1948, in particular. That's when the two Sullivan brothers came with, and they came with two Malones, I believe, right? Too.
Yeah.
They didn't know each other till they got.
They didn't know each other till they got here.
Years later, they discovered it.
That they were, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, and so there was a lot that came over that one year in '48, and I think that's when Mike Mchugh came over as well, your brother Marty, I think, and Mike McNamara. Con Sullivan was telling me that both him and Mike Sullivan and the two Malones came on was like a decommissioned military ship, and he said it was horrible. And they were hanging. They had ropes on the deck, and they were hanging onto the ropes. And he made it sound like they were getting dunked in the ocean, and it's only for the ropes that they were staying on the ship. And he said, and they got to New York. He got to New York, and they went to, was it Joan Shea?
Yeah.
They went to which would have been their aunt. They went to her house. They had a quick meal and jumped on the train. There was no. They didn't even stay the night in New York City. They got on the train, and it was straight on to Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then they arrived. And so So yeah, so we're gonna stay with the Mike and Con Sullivan story for a minute
But you
here.
know, that isn't,
Like killed in Chicago.
that's Con on the left.
But that's not Mike?
The guy in the
No,
middle.
that's my, another cousin.
So-
Okay.
And his name is John Mahoney.
Aha,
And
okay.
he was here for like 2 years and then he went to Boston.
Aha, very
He
good.
had a girlfriend there, so that was the drawing card.
That's good. That'll do it. That'll do it. So, so Mike and Con came over, and I think it was their Aunt Mary that sponsored them. If I'm getting all this right, I got a lot of names and dates in my head. So
Yeah.
thanks for the help. But it didn't work out with Aunt Mary. Aunt Mary wasn't ready to take on 2 Irish teenagers, so she sent him over to her brother Mike Mahoney, right, Pat's dad, and so they kind of became Irish brothers, sort of, for Pat. You know, that moved into the house, and they got set up with jobs at the bank. Con said, they had us work in this cash register, and all we knew how to do was milk a cow. He said, and there weren't any of those around. It's amazing. So they, so they worked for the bank a couple of years, and the other thing they did was they got introduced to the Irish American Club. So we think the story the Morans tell is that Sis was looking around, that she had met one of the, well, maybe it was, would it be your dad, Mark? Anyway, there was a Malone and a McDonough. There was a couple of the ones that had just come over that Sis met, and she started thinking, so we have to do something for all these young people that are coming over for Ireland. We have to organize something. And one of the Curtins rented the hall, and the hall they rented was Woodruff Hall, which is just down the road, just on Pryor, right by where 94 is now, like Pryor and St. Anthony. I don't think the building's there anymore. I don't think. It got burned. Pat says it was a fire trap, so it probably was bound to burn.
It was a steep stairway, and once you got up, you never wanted to go down again.
So this is the earliest mention I can find of a club event, but we think this is for St. Patrick's Day 1949, but we think they probably started the fall before that. And they had an Irish tenor at this one that lived in Minneapolis, Jackie Collins, or whatever it said, Jackie Collins. And then this is another picture from the same event. The 3 Marines, these were 3 other recent arrivals. Marino Sullivan of Galway, Marine Long of Kerry, and Marine Devaney of Galway. And mentioned there again of the tenor and modern and old-time dance music. And it's interesting, right below that, there's another ad for the Shamrock Club was still going at that point. They were having their 36th annual event, and they had Mike Sullivan on the fiddle with his daughter Ann on piano. Pat Doherty and Mike Hughes were playing music. So there's Mike Hughes again. Who was it? Con Sullivan was saying he remembers there being 2 halls for a while. There was one hall where there'd be dances at that end, and then you'd progress over to the other one. That's another picture of 2 of the Marines. And that mentions this Tom Crawford, who was also instrumental in the early days. There's another Tom Kelly from Wexford, right? Maybe? Somebody thought. So that was also involved in the early days of the club. They sometimes moved a little bit north up to University in Pryor, so it's amazing how close this is to where we are right now. Just at the University in Pryor, a place called the Midway Club that was a bit nicer. It seems the consensus is that was a nicer place, kind of a bigger ballroom that was maybe owned by the airline, Northwest Airlines, maybe? Yeah, so they had dances there. And there's a picture with John Malone in that one, and Peggy Barrett. There were a couple Barretts. It was Dan Barrett, and they were from Galway. And I don't know, where was Eileen Flanagan from? I don't know. Maybe know that one. And the Devaney from Galway. But, yeah. So they're doing, oh yeah, and it says Kathleen McDonough on there, but I don't think she's actually in the picture. She got cut off, but they kept her name. but they, yeah, that would be Mark's mom, your mom, yeah. So they had a variety of dancing, and I'll talk more about that, but a step dance was often like an intermission routine. And I'll play this here. So this is a song made up by Patty Hill that Charlie gave me this recording, and I'll just play a couple verses here. This is actually a song about the early days of the Irish American Club, sung by Pat Hill.
From the hills of County Kerry to the shores of Londonderry, and from Galway Bay to Dublin, and their numbers were not small, came each youthful boy and maiden, with health and beauty laden, to uncles, aunts and cousins who were settled in St. Paul. We figured then quite clearly there'd be others coming yearly, so an Irish club was formed that our legends might survive. Irish music, dance and singing, with mirth the hall was ringing. Gaelic football every Sunday we also kept alive.
Isn't that great? And there's the Gaelic football right there, as mentioned. That's Dennis D, who's here today in the front row, playing Gaelic football in Como Park in 1950. Martin Mchugh?
Yeah.
Did you play Gaelic football in Como Park? I think you did.
Yeah.
You said there was a GAA thing going on right when you arrived here, I think.
Yeah, they just started.
Yeah, they just started. Right. That's great. And there's Dennis again, singing this time at one of the early club events. Patsy Fagan is the song I keep hearing that you used to do, but I don't know. I'm sure there were other ones. So Dennis singing at one of the halls. Now Pat thought maybe that was the hall up in Frogtown, but if it was 50, it might have been one of the ones over here too. I don't know. But it's cool to see the setup on the stage. Oh, look at that handsome guy. So these pictures. These came from Con Sullivan. That's a postcard that Marty wrote Con, and the story was that it wasn't long after a lot of these guys were over that they got drafted or enlisted in the U.S. Army or the Air Force, and it was the days of the Korean War. So Marty went out to Washington State, and Con went fairly quickly to Korea, I think, after boot camp. I think he was in Washington as well, and there were McDonoughs that were out in Washington. Dennis was in the Dakotas, were you in South Dakota in the Air Force? Yeah. So it's kind of
Spread around.
yeah, amazing how the timeline of that moving up, getting sent all around the country and doing service in the Army. Con says you never wore those hats after the picture. They look good for the picture. But it's amazing to me that some of you met up then. Like Marty talks about meeting some McDonoughs out in Washington, and then the two brothers here, Con and Mike, managed to find each other in Korea, actually, is where that photo. It's kind of amazing. Yeah, that's them over in Korea. But Mike was in Indiana, I think you said, where he was.
And then he used to go to Chicago.
And so he kind of got connected to Chicago by being in Indiana. And then the other thing that happened during that time period, or what Pat was saying, like Dennis's sister Bridie was over and got really, it must have been kind of a time to be really homesick with so many people gone, and she got kind of homesick, and Pat was saying she went to Chicago because Chicago was basically like going back to Ireland, because there were so many Irish people in Chicago, and then of course with Mike being stationed in Indiana, he was going into Chicago, and they were connected there. I think this picture is in Chicago.
It is.
It is,
yeah.
in Marquette Park, and there's the quote.
That's Dennis's sister in the middle.
Right, so that's Bridie in the middle. Right, and Maureen Long, that was in one of the other pictures. And I don't know who the O'Brien is. Anyway. Yeah, so just to show that connection.
I just know that one guy's name is Henry Keene.
Yeah, yep, the one on the right. Yeah. You look like you don't want Donnie's hand right there. I like it.
Is it Dennis then?
Yeah, she's Dennis's sister, right? Yeah, Bridget. Yeah. Back in St. Paul, the dances were continuing. They had weekly dances. In fact, one of those earlier, the one that had the picture that had John Malone in it. There's a lot of information. There's some quotes from Sis below it. The dances. This is what Sis said about the early dances. The dances are really parties where ideas can be exchanged. We wanted to do something for about 50 young people from Ireland we knew about. In the old days, they could have been entertained in private homes, but now homes are too small and there were just too many people. We did the next best thing. We hired a hall. So they had the dances were weekly on Saturday nights, except for summer and during Lent. They were open to the public. They always had both old-time and modern dances and intermission entertainment of an Irish flavor, such as Patsy Fagan maybe, or a step dance. And then they got going with the Gaelic football on Sunday afternoons. Paddy Hill talks about another guy, Joe Keegan from Roscommon. Remember Joe Keegan? This is so Paddy Hill was an incredible poet. Everything was rhymed. This is him remembering Joe Keegan arriving in town. In a mood of retrospection, I clearly recall the autumn Sunday afternoon you landed in St. Paul. We could see that you felt lonely in the city all alone, coming in from North Dakota, where the Irish are unknown. So he was up there. My wife, she thought a cup of tea would help to chase your blues in the company of Pat Scully, the Curtins, and McHughes. Then we all went to the supper of Division 17, that must have been the Hibernians. There were Irish songs and dancing with a sprinkling of the green. When the program was over, we retired unto the hall, where we met the boys and girls you were introduced to all. There Marty, with his music box, the crowd did entertain, a bit of dear old Ireland transported o'er the main. And me with my old fiddle played right along with Mart. We knew 'twould ease the tension of your aching, lonely heart. I see it all before me, Joe, and that's how I recall the way we spent the Sunday that you landed in St. Paul. Isn't that great? That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great stuff. It's amazing. So that's Paddy Hill, and he played the fiddle. I haven't found a photo of him with a fiddle, but people remember that he would, of course, play the fiddle at dances. And so did Tony Doherty. Tony Doherty, one reason I think a lot of people don't remember him, and I've been lucky to meet some of the Doherty family, but he had struggled with cancer in the 50s, and he was going down to Mayo for various treatments. And the club was amazing for so many people. They had fundraisers. They raised they raised money for him. His wife said they held a fundraiser and they gave him a purse of $250, which is probably a lot of money at the time, to help defray his hospital and doctor bills. Amazing. And there's Pat Mahoney, D, in the front there. And this is a photo that ran in the newspaper for a St. Patrick's Day celebration at Ramaley's Hall, which I think is the same location that became O'Connell's, or roughly the same. O'Connell's was downstairs. Ramaley's was upstairs. Okay, I gotcha. Cool. And I have so this is another Paddy Hill poem here, and I think this is possibly from that very year, based on the people that were involved, Pat and then Mary McGing, and Paddy Hill and Coley McDonough. So I find this one works with a little bit of a melody to it, so if you'll humor me, I'm going to sing some of it. But this is a letter that Patrick Hill wrote to Marty Mchugh in, we think, 53 or thereabouts, giving him the news about St. Patrick's Day. I thought I'd write and tell you all the news, and if I'm late, I hope you'll me excuse. It was nice to get your letters in the past. I'm glad to know you're coming home at last. It was from the service. Well, I suppose that you would like to know about St. Patrick's dance. Well, here I go. Preparing for that night is quite a chore. Details must be arranged 4 weeks before. Committees must be set up for various jobs. Policemen hired to control the mobs. John Curtin was selected for the door. Mike Sullivan in charge around the floor. And then to sell the tickets for the beer, we appointed Catherine Burke, our financier. To let the public know we'd be their host, Pat Curtin was selected for that post. Joe Keneally, Martin Griffin did appear in aprons selling pop and ice and beer. Pat Mahoney was selected as the queen. To see the hall was all decked out in green. In charge of entertainment, Miss McGing engaged the talent for to dance and sing. Coley McDonough in charge of each event, the carnival king and queen he did present. Well, he did a master job, the best in town, but good old Coley never let us down. He's always there to give a helping hand. Our guests and members all agree he's grand. Pat Curtin had some pictures in the press and circulars to all we did address. There were radio announcements of the ball, inviting crowds to join us at the hall. Imported here from Ireland's sunny shore were prizes to be given at the door. Joe Keneally arranged with KSTP that Irish music o'er the air would be. Marty talks about you playing on KSTP on the radio, and I think these were the KSTP guys. Don Riley and Bob Ryan did their share by sending out that music on the air to tell you all were there would take too long. The crowd was far beyond 600 strong. That's pretty good. The whiskey too was plentiful all night, but best of all, we never had a fight. The committees all worked hard with heart and hand. How smoothly things were run was simply grand. The atmosphere was Irish round the hall, with harps and shamrocks pasted on each wall. Tony and his band we did engage, his instruments and drums did fill the stage. I think that might be Tony Gruchot, I've got a picture of in a little bit, who had a band with drums and all that. The program too, I'd say, was very fine. The seniors thought the young ones were divine. The singing too I really did enjoy. Young Kelly sang The Wild Colonial Boy. We had a lot of guests from out of town and also local fans of great renown. Tom Connolly was there with Louis Hill. They were shaking hands with every Jack and Jill. Danny Barrett and his wife arrived by plane. It was good to see this couple back again. I wish that in St. Paul they both could stay. They will come back again, Lacuna J. Joe Dowling, he was there, I knew he would. He's looking skinny, but he's feeling good. Well, that's the news about our Irish ball. We really shook the rafters in the hall. But once again, our Irish flag was stole. The culprit left us nothing but the pole. So you would remember that flag getting stolen? Was that a thing? Somebody stole the flag at the end of the... So there's the Sullivan brothers after getting back. Con and Mike getting back from the war in Korea. And like I was saying with Pat, their mom was okay with them coming to America. She really didn't want them to go to England, and she wasn't crazy about them going off to fight in Korea either. So she made them agree that as soon as they got back from Korea, they'd come straight back to Kenmare, County Kerry, and pay mom a visit. And Pat ended up going along that summer as well, and has great memories. He had a ball. Maybe later when we have pass around the mic, you could tell a story about going over there with the cousins. But that was in the newspaper. Does anybody remember Orchard Lake, or the Seagirt Inn, or the dances down by Orchard Lake? I think that Keneally that was mentioned in the song was Joe Keneally was down in that area, was he? And so that I don't know if that hall itself rings a bell or anything, but that
It was out over the lake.
yeah, that looks like it's right by the lake there. I think this is this place called the Seagirt Inn, and it mentions Frank Gallagher from Savage. Does anyone remember that name? He was like a politician, I think. He was involved in the club sometimes. There was a new hall then in '54. The club moved to the hall that I think a lot of people seem to remember the best, which was one down in Frogtown, 345 and a half University. It was even listed sometimes in the newspaper as the Irish American Hall, so it was kind of a permanent place then for a while.
I think it's in Virginia.
Visited about it in Virginia and University. And they're always raising money here for a missionary priest, raising money for the orphanage, raising money to help people visit Ireland again. There's Dennis D. singing in the newspaper, and it mentions there again Tom Kelly. And it mentions this Frank Gallagher guy again. Yeah. This is a beautiful photo of a gathering that the club put together to honor men that had been in the service during the Korean War years. And this was at the Red Feather Inn on University, down by Dale somewhere. And that's got a lot of the whole gang in there, including Marty and Michael Sullivan and Dennis D. that's here today, Con Sullivan. Tom Malone is there, yeah, and a Conroy. See, and Patty Hill. Do you remember where the Caseys were from? Martin Casey?
There.
Claire?
Claire, yeah.
Nice
And
one.
there's Joe Dowling.
And Joe Dowling looking skinny, but he's feeling good. And if you can just barely see it in the picture with the ribbons, the ribbons say Twin Cities Irish American Club on it, and everybody has the ribbon. Then they, this is one where they're talking about somebody that Margaret Callahan is going back to County Mayo to visit her people back in Mayo, and the one quote I wanted to bring from my meeting with Henry Scanlon was he said, you know, the club used to have these events and they would take money at the door and they'd give it to the person going back to Ireland to help them pay for their trip, and he said, you know, that's a really nice thing to do. And he's right. It is a really nice thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to do.
And Peggy stayed back.
I wanted them to have two.
Yeah.
great students.
Oh, she never came. Oh, the Margaret that's mentioned.
Children by Peggy.
Oh, Peggy. Okay, yeah.
And that's Mary Long's sister.
Oh, this one, Margaret,
Yeah.
is Mary Long's sister. Okay, look out. There's the big news.
Oh my goodness.
Con did that. Con gave me that.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so that's Dennis and Pat, and I just had to put that up because Pat Hill has this wonderful couple verses in his. This is the same song I started playing earlier, and he's talking about how many wedding bells were ringing for a while with the club.
And what with all the dances, there was quite a few romances. The wedding bells kept ringing through the summer and the fall. And I know the angels blessed him as friends and kin caressed him when the ceremonies was over and we gathered at the hall. There were some we watched them nightly, looking bashful, talking quietly, but a little drop of putty in work magic I did layer. The shyful blush had vanished, the feeling blue was banished, and they would exhibit talents we never knew was there. That was the putty, that's why I
Isn't that great? Oh, that's fantastic. So I'll take poor Pat and Dennis off the hot seat here and put Bridie on the hot seat. A little bit with some more wedding. These are wedding party pictures now back at the club at 345 and a half University Avenue. I love that address. Jerry Capping, Dennis D, Bill Capping, the groom of the evening, and Pat Conroy and Con Sullivan. And Con had some more photos. I know, so you have to tell me if these are from the same wedding or not. But I think that's Pete O'Brien there. And it's this.
One of the twins, is that Nancy or I don't know which one. Oh, and that's
There's two
Catherine
Devaney's
Griffin?
in there. Two Devaney
so.
ladies.
And Devaney's?
yeah. Oh yeah, I see her. Yeah.
Yeah, it captures the scene for sure. I love it. And then there's a couple more. I don't know if you recognize any of those folks.
Oh, there's Johnny Malone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That's your dad's uncle, Mark.
Sullivan.
Yeah. Is it? I thought is that Mike? Is that Mike on the left? Yeah. See, I don't know who's wedding. Yeah. Maybe it's just. Well, they're all dressed up though. Is that just an average Saturday night out? Oh, it's great. And who's there? That's your dad and mom? Oh, that's great.
Uncle Tom on empty cake.
Oh, that's great. And I think all these are all in the clubhouse, are they, or in the place on University?
That's in the hall of the.
Which one? Yeah,
That's
in the first part of the hall. Yeah, I think like if you look over Khan's shoulder on the right there, you can see into a room, and that was where the dancing was. Maybe.
Yeah. I wonder if that was,
Or was that somewhere else?
Maureen Long's wedding.
Yeah, yeah. Khan wasn't sure, so.
Yeah, I think that's whose wedding it was.
Okay.
Because we were gone. I mean, I was over in Ireland and kind of Mike.
Oh, so maybe it was that summer when you were
Not
gone.
in any of those, I bet that's.
Yeah, that would make sense. So this is a picture kind of again showing the Chicago connection. So that's Mike Sullivan down in the left.
Yep.
And he had moved to Chicago after the war. And there's Marty Mchugh there, and Pat Curtin standing up. And the guy that Martin's touching the shoulder, his name was John Shea. He was from Cary, but he lived in Chicago. But it's just, I thought it's interesting because Mike's from Cary and he's from Cary, and everybody says like in Chicago, there's so many people, it was almost like you could just go to a Cary dance or.
A Cary dance down there.
Yeah.
And I thought I was back in Ireland.
Yeah. It's amazing. And this was this party that some of the local musicians have seen. This was the Cooley brothers, famous Joe Cooley and Seamus Cooley were at this party, and there's Marty on stage with the Cooleys, and that John Shea from Cary. That's at Hanley's House of Happiness,
That's it.
south side of Chicago.
Nathan Bishop.
Yeah. So just to talk a little bit about the music, this article here mentioned. I think it's great because it starts out with the Siege of Venice, with really popular Ceilidh dance, and then it also gets to the point where and also foxtrotting. So there was a good variety of dancing. Marty says they did the bunny hop. They did it all kinds of dancing.
The bunny hop.
And the bands had to kind of like be flexible, There's they had to be able to do different things, like play the saxophone. That's Emmett McCarthy, one of the founders of the Brian Boru pipe band, who played sax at Irish American Club events. He was from Cork, right? Skibbereen?
Yeah.
And here's Emmett.
There he is.
There's Emmett again with the sax and Marty, and we think we know that's Mike Hughes with the glasses, with the fiddle, and then I think that's Mike Nash, you thought.
That's it on the left.
Yeah, it's kind of blotted out. And this is Tony Groucho's orchestra that played at a number of the club events and could do different styles. That's probably their sax player, we think, maybe over on the right.
I think he was a drummer, I think.
And Tony Groucho himself was a drummer.
Yeah.
Henry Scanlon says they were great. They were a great
They were a
band.
good band.
Good band, yeah,
Good band.
for sure. So, and there's that's from the Morans had that. That's an after hours shot. It looks like Emmett and Marty hadn't had enough. They're still going.
More than a water heater, there's a beer heater up there.
It's awfully cool. I like that. Very cool. Oh, I gotta switch over to pushing the button here. So it's interesting. This is my librarian moment. We have a book at the library upstairs that was done by an academic on the scene in Boston during the 50s and 60s called "See You at the Hall." It's amazing how similar some of the stuff is. Like they talk about the dance bands being able to play the bunny hop or the foxtrot, and then do a Siege of Venice and kind of switching back and forth.
Go to Ryan could play it.
Yeah, and having all the horns in the band. And one of the main band that's mentioned in this book, the center of attention in Boston during that era was Johnny Powell. And Johnny Powell had a connection.
Here to the McDonald's.
He had a connection here in the Twin Cities. So Johnny Powell is the fourth from the left there, and that's his band at the Intercontinental Hall in Boston. He owned the hall, him and his brother owned the hall and ran it, and that was the big show in Boston and they had weekly dances there at the Intercontinental, and he was related to the McDonoughs. He was a cousin of Sis, right? And Marty or Patty Hill or someone was saying he actually worked here for a while at the airport or something, or had some connection. Maybe it was Patty Hill was saying
I
that.
don't think he ever walked here.
Okay, well he was here a few times and played for a dance.
Quite a few times.
Yeah. And that's an amazing photo. And it gives you a feel, again, you know, a band like that could play a few different styles, right?
There we are.
So there he is. And so whose house is he at there? That's at Sis's house. Sis and Vince's house. And is that Grandpa Pat? That's Grandpa Pat. So that's him in St. Paul playing away. So I thought it was fascinating to discover this connection to this accordion player from Boston. And then I was over when I met with Pat and Dennis. Pat said, "Well, I've got these old records if you want any of them." And there was Johnny Powell on a 78 RPM record.
Yeah, we had a lot of those.
And and what is he playing? He's playing. So Marty did a CD with Laura McKenzie and Dahi that are here today, and he played Johnny Powell's Polka, and it's on the record. It's on Pat's record.
Yeah.
So I thought
78.
yeah.
That's what Brian got.
See if the music will come out. And I was going to say too about Johnny Powell, like Patty Hill remembered him really well, you know, and there was connections to these musicians from far away, and Patty Hill knew him well enough that he said that he was a better accordion player than Joe Duran. So big news, big fighting words. Ed Linehan turns up in one of these things from the 60s. The Historical Society has the original copy of that photo, and I'd love to get it. But he was from the north. He was from County Down, or Belfast, and he came over in 1920, and he was still dancing on St. Patrick's Day in the 60s. Sounds like he was kind of a character, was he, Marty?
He was.
Was he? Yeah. Patty Hill says his pipes had an odor to them. His bagpipes, yeah. This is great too. The Irish American Club was just down the hill there at Newell Park, not far away often, for a picnic. And Patty Hill even had some verses about the picnics at Newell Park. This was from a rhymed letter that he wrote to Pat Curtin. "There is nothing strange appeared in range since you have gone away. Our picnic bunch with drink and lunch had a wet, cold, dismal day. 'Twas not worth the price if I had my choice. At home I'd sooner stay. Though I must admit the place was fit for a picnic any day. They kicked football as the rain did fall. The boys got wet and tired, and in the shade some cards were played, in our raincoats all attired. And one by one as night came on, we started for the hall, where we drank and pranced and played and danced till midnight in St. Paul." And the next, I won't read the whole next verse, but the next sentence is, "With Marty Mchugh, we left at 2. That's 2 in the afternoon, right, Marty?
Yeah.
It's around this time that Marty has some pictures from over at O'Gara's, which was not, I don't think, an official part of the Irish American Club, but an important part of the scene going way back to the 40s, right? I think the O'Gara's first to open. And that's Marty, probably on St. Patrick's Day, judging by the green bow tie, playing with Patty Hill looking on. And then is that Jim O'Gara possibly in the other one?
Yeah.
In the one on the right? Yeah. That's amazing. Those are pictures from Marty with the old Baldoni.
Doherty, that's right.
In the early 60s, the club moved over to the Ford Union Hall, right outside the gate of the big Ford factory in Highland Park. Right. It's a Eric's Bike Shop now, I think. I think that building is still there.
They used to have those St. Paddy's Day dance there.
At the Ford Union Hall?
Ford, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thrown out of there too.
Bigger place. And it was in '62 that the Brian Boru Irish Pipe Band got started. And there's Emmett that we saw with the saxophone there in his great-looking beret in the middle, sitting around the table when they're just getting started, and they just had the chanters. They didn't have the bags, the pipes yet. The Brian Boru celebrates their 60th anniversary this year, so I'm hoping to do a little bit more digging, and I keep meaning to chat with John Ford, who might be in that picture, noisy, about the early days of the Boru. But they became an important part of the Irish American Club then, and collaborated with dancers that were involved in the club. Rita Berg, Tom Casey, Maureen Hand, and Kathleen Hand, who their dad was from Roscommon.
George O'Leary.
And George O'Leary from Clark, and Bridie O'Leary. That's from St. Patrick's Day 1963. And Father McNiff turns up in this era too. He was one of the Columban fathers that had the house on Summit, right?
Summit and Hamlet.
Summit, yeah. And we don't know who the dancers are. I don't know. Maybe somebody else does. But he's doing music for some folks. This, I don't know. Would that be possibly at the Mission House?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they had a benefit for him as he was being transferred down to Texas. And the Brian Boru was playing, and Tony Gruchot's orchestra was still playing for that. Now I'll try to get.
With the officers' command and our club began expanding, we did a mighty lot of good in a quiet and humble way. The mission house was cherished, the orphan house was nourished. We shared the joys and sorrows of our people day by day. But half the pride of living is the heartfelt joy of giving. Our club have been rewarded with treasures more than gold. We are known and are respected, and by rich and poor accepted, and Christian Irish people keep flocking to our fold.
About the orphan house and the mission house. There's the Boru playing for a club event. We don't think that's the Ford Union Hall. They were also up on Payne sometimes. A couple different halls on Payne. So I wonder if that might be where that is. I think Sis is peeking out in the back of one of those maybe too. I can't remember. Or no, maybe it was the other one. So the Boru started to loom a little bit larger in the community through these years in the early 60s, and they started putting on an event at the Sheraton Ritz in Minneapolis that I think some club people were involved in. There's Andy Vaughn was involved in the club in the late 50s, early 60s, and is that his daughter? But Deirdre's Andy's daughter, is it? I think. Anyway, there's a Vaughn there, just to show a little bit of the younger generation getting in the act, which was kind of a little bit rare, it seems like, that people were involved in music and dancing in that era. And the last newspaper mention I can find of the club is from 1967, a dance up on Rice Street at the North End Improvement Club. And you kind of get the impression that things were changing at that point, and Pat says, well, we all had kids. We were all busy. We were all too busy. Exactly. And Pat and Bridie told me a story about they hired the band, and it was a masquerade dance, and they got their costumes on, and they showed up, and it was just them and the band. And so it was kind of a sign of changing times for the club. And that happens in the community. Things get kind of passed on to the next generation, and people do things in different ways, and the Boru kind of carried on with St. Patrick's Day in a lot of ways, hosting events there at the St. Paul Hotel. Yeah.
Years at that place on Rice.
At the Rice Place,
Yeah.
the North End Improvement Club.
I remember being.
Yeah, but you still see the club's name around all the way up into the 80s. It appears even on some of the early Irish Fair things. It's mentioned as one of the sponsors of things. So people were still kind of keeping the idea alive. But you know, there were other events in town, as there often are. But Marty Mchugh, I love that picture because I think that's kind of from that in-between era, after the late 60s into the 70s, and that's at O'Gara's. And I like to think of Marty carrying the music on his shoulders through that era, kind of when the Irish American Club wasn't holding as many dances, and some of the people that got started in the later 70s were just getting interested. I think that's Rowe behind him in the maroon, is it? Somebody said Tommy Rowe? I think maybe? Possibly.
Quite big. Looks like Tommy.
And then it was a new era, a new era in the late 70s, in a few different ways, with McCafferty's opening on Grand Avenue, and a new generation of Minnesotans getting interested in Irish music. I thought this was interesting, a really early mention of Sam Dillon and Mary McEachran playing with Bill and Judy Larson at the New Riverside Cafe in '76. I'm sure were you playing in town by then, Laura, in '76? Yeah. And I think we might have an early picture of Laura here coming up next. But Tom Dahill, who's here today, was certainly playing, and Charlie was playing it, and they'd been out of town for a few years by that point, by '76, and we're coming back and meeting some of these people, right? Like meeting Patty Hill and meeting Marty. That's John Curtin in the middle, I think, yeah, and Marty. And there's Charlie and Ann, and there's Laura, and Marty and Jamie Gans. In the early days of a new era, and it's just amazing to me that there's the Baldoni again. Marty kind of, carrying the music and carrying the tradition down, and then handing it down to this new group of people in the '70s. It's wonderful, and then to still be handing it down when I came here in the '90s. It's great. Yeah, exactly. It's coming. And the folks like Laura and Tom and the Haymans that were here at that time kind of got to see some of that earlier era that I never got to see. Got to see some of these people. Yeah, I think Kathleen, is that Bernie Rowe maybe in the picture too? I can't remember who these people are, but Ray anyway. And over on the left is Marty and his sister Kathleen, right? This is all from Charlie and Ann's wedding, these two pictures.
Charlie's wedding.
Yeah, Charlie's wedding. And Marty was playing music and dancing. And I put that, and that's, Pete O'Brien, we think?
It is Pete O'Brien.
Oh, and Lee Curtin was, that's Pete O'Brien in that one, yeah. With the broom dance at Charlie and Ann's wedding. And we think that's this, anyway, there's another picture of Pete at the end. That one from the wedding.
Tom Dahill played there.
Yeah, there's Tom Dahill on the stage. So it's just kind of, I just think it's so cool to think about that continuity, that handing off of tradition to the next generation. So I'll just, we're going to take a little break here. We got kind of a late start, and then I've been yakking for ages. So I'm going to play one more little Patty Hill clip, let him finish out his song the way he wanted to finish it. And then we'll take just a quick break. I don't want to go too long, but we're going to kind of reconfigure. Anybody that was in the club, I'd like to invite you up to the table. Maybe we'll each tell a quick story. And if anybody has any questions, we can do that. Tim and Rose, you guys were volunteered by your family members to maybe come up and tell a quick story. And we'll do that here in a second, but I'll let Pat Hill here have the last word.
We all feel quite elated o'er how high the club is rated. The part that I donated, I feel was rather small. It will always give me pleasure, fond thoughts I'll always treasure, our friendships true and wholesome, cultivated in St. Paul. We will prove our reputation to our people round the nation. Let no jealousy or discord within our ranks prevail. We'll show our hospitality to every nationality, and our fame will be re-echoed to the shores of Innisfail.
That's a really good song.
Yeah, so thanks everybody. Thanks so much. We'll take a little break and we'll have a little chat, and then we're going to have a little bit of music from Marty and friends to finish off. I just wanted to take the opportunity to maybe just have a few stories from some of the people that were involved in the club, and I thought I would and then we're going to have a little bit of music from Marty Mchugh, Laura McKenzie, and Doherty Sproul. I wanted to share with you too, Marty's CD is available today if anybody would like to buy it. It's really kind of a wonderful document of a musician who stretches all through all these years, a few years, only like 3 or 4 years really. He's only like 35 now, I think. So, but it is a great CD. You should check that out. And I'm going to just quickly go down the river. Bridie says you're not talking, huh?
No, I
Okay.
just want to say how wonderful talk you gave tonight.
Oh, thanks,
I
Bridie.
enjoyed it.
Thanks. Thank you so much. So this is Bridie Conroy capping from Galway. What year did you come over?
1950.
1950. That's fantastic. And Pat Mahoney D is here. Pat was here in the beginning because she's from here, right? Were you born in Minneapolis? Did you grow up in Minneapolis?
St. Mary's Hospital.
Here, sorry, I'm going to put this over by just in case you might talk into it.
I got my introduction to the Irish mainly when my cousins came over in 1950. 48. They came in 48. I was still in high school. Okay.
Thanks, Heather.
I was still in high school, but learning to drive so I could take them around and show them different things. I took them roller skating, and they'd never seen a roller skates. Took them bowling and introduced them to all kinds of fun things. And of course they thought I was nuts, I'm sure. But my dad sought out a place, and it was, where did you say, down?
The Woodruff Hall place down on,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it was an upstairs hall, kind of a shaky steps to get up, but, and the first person we met that night was Tom Kelly. And so then he introduced us around and that. So. And I guess it was quite a while before they found out that they had come over with your dad and
With the
uncle
Daddy
Malones.
was married to
on the same boat.
farmer.
But there were a lot on the
Mary,
boat at the time.
and
So
married
I
Tom
suppose they
Burton's
didn't,
sister.
if they were sick, they weren't asking any questions. Okay,
And somebody asked, well, I can ask this to, maybe, I'll let Tim introduce himself, then I have a couple questions, but go ahead,
all
Tim.
right.
I was only born in 1951, so I'm talking about a history that I got through my parents. My mother was Margaret, or Sis McDonough, and the way that she met her husband was Tom Malone and his brother Mike came over from Kerry, and they were sponsored by their uncle, which was down on the farm in Curry. And so after Dad got out of the war, he worked on the Malone farm along with Tom and Mike, and they heard about all of these things that were going on in the Twin Cities with the Twin City Irish American Club, because the Longs were the cousins of Malones and other people from Kerry, and they were having these dances because they started right after the war ended. And so Dad was the one who had the car. And so Curry is about 150 miles southwest here, about 30 miles from Iowa and 30 miles from South Dakota down there. And so Dad would drive up a few of them to come up here, and he would stay with my grandfather, Pat McDonough, his aunt, our sister, who was Auntie Goodman. And Auntie Goodman would always make fresh bread for him and send it back with them. But that's where Tom met Kate, who was my mother's youngest sister. And Dad and Tom were fighting for Kate. And my dad ended up with Mom. So Tom and Kate met there at the Irish Club dances, and My mother met Dad. They never thought that she was going to marry because she got married at age 35. Dad was 25 at that point, moved down to the farm. She had never been on a farm in her life, and had a whole slew of us kids. So we moved off the farm in 1955. They got married in 1950. There were 4 of us who moved up in the Twin Cities, and that's where we got reintroduced to the Irish American Club. And by that time, there were a lot of marriages and weddings going on, or have happened already. And she got back involved with the club, and also she was a part of the Columban Missions, that's where Father McNiff came in and raising money for the missions there. And I remember being a coat check at a couple of their dances over at the Union Hall when they moved over there. And then we grew up in St. Paul. We had to move back to St. Paul. We could not move to Minneapolis, so we didn't know anything about what happened in Minneapolis. But then we are part of those Christmas parties that they had.
Yeah. Great. Hi. Is it Rose?
Rosie, yep.
Hi, Rose.
Great unveiling.
We're the twins.
Yes, and it's, I should say, so we have twins here among us today, and Con Sullivan, that couldn't be here today, remembers holding you two when you were newborns down in Curry, I think.
She was heavier than that.
Yeah. And Con wasn't a big fan of the farm.
Nobody was.
Nor was my mother.
We were there for some,
Oh, yeah.
So August of 51.
yeah, and a whole bunch of us went down. And the big deal was Mary and Mike Long weren't married, so they had to be split up, you know, and sent to a different place. So somebody had to volunteer, and my husband, we were just like, volunteered because he wanted no part of staying up there. I remember it well. So he stayed down at Malone.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't remember what we were there for.
She was Mom's sanity.
Yeah, no, but I mean, why we were down there, there were a whole bunch of us had gone down there for something they weren't going.
Maybe another wedding or another party.
Maybe that was when Mike Long was going in the service. That might have been it. Yeah, because we went to some little pub and we had the jukebox hopping. But anyway, so Dennis stayed over at Malone's to make a long story short.
They probably had running water there.
Right. I think one of Mom's treasured wedding presents was the fur-lined toilet seat for the outhouse.
And we went down there in the winter one time.
Oh, out where God left his overshoes.
Line seat. And we pulled into the yard. We had a 39 Ford. We pulled into the yard. The heater stopped halfway down. And we pulled into the yard, and the car never stopped again until we were ready to come home, and Vince jumped. Got us. Oh, we used to take terrible chances. But they were like tanks.
And had a grand time.
Oh, and lots of people in it. That's one thing I never told my kids. I piled into a car.
Well, didn't Sis have a car too, or did?
No.
Oh
She
yeah.
learned to drive on the farm.
She would take the car around. While Dad was out doing the chores, he would go around the farm and see if she could figure things out. And then she didn't have any money for gifts, but Dad was a trapper. So she was able to get into town and sell the furs. She'd have money to buy Christmas gifts.
Wow.
And she got out and she went off the road. No license yet. She tells the story.
In the ditch.
Yeah.
Tells the story.
Wow.
Some farmer came and pulled her out.
Wow.
And she came home bawling and crying. Had money
Yeah.
Yeah.
to buy Christmas gifts.
Well, what do you remember about the Club Rose? Anything from those days?
Well, a couple of things. I remember the picnics at Newell Park and watching Uncle Tom and my dad play Irish football. And I also remember the stories of all of the parties at the McDonough house, you know, rolling up the rugs, and Marty would come and play and the others, and it was always an amazing, welcoming space. And it's a sense of hospitality we grew up with. I mean, everybody was always welcome. And, you know, on St. Patrick's Day, of course, my mom made Irish soda bread and would be playing Johnny Powell's records, the 78s on the Victrola. And we didn't, as kids, understand how treasured those records were. They became Frisbees.
Yeah, that's what Tim was saying.
Breaking them over each other's heads, you know. But growing up, knowing for sure we were Irish and part of a whole clan, and walking in today and instantly recognizing Pat and Dennis. I mean, there was a whole extended Irish family that we were a part of, that we knew we were a part of. And I remember Mom and Dad's 25th wedding anniversary, and everybody came. I mean, it was a party.
That's wonderful. Well, thanks. So, somebody had one question I'll ask you, and then we'll get Marty up to play some tunes. Did they go every week? Did the dances happen every week? And who paid for the hall, and how did it all work?
You know, now that you say that, I haven't a clue. But we did have Mary McGing and Catherine Burke.
Yeah.
Were fantastic. And they kept things going, obviously. And they didn't fuss to any of us about, you know, you need this to pay or any of that kind of stuff. We paid a small fee to get in, and I don't remember what that was. Might have been 50 cents or $1 or something. But I don't remember anything about that part of it.
Yeah.
But I know that they both really deserved a lot of credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Martin Welch was on the door.
Yeah.
Who was on the door? Martin Roach?
Martin Welch.
Well.
I remember that one.
And you said the Flaherty kids were in the coat hall, or who was in the coat hall? The band?
Oh, the Kennedy kids.
Kennedy kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, we had a party at your house one.
Oh, yeah, a few times.
And you put Martin Welch.
Yeah,
Just
at the door.
made a man out and you put Martin
He used to
Welch
give
on-
his talk.
Martin Welch on the
Yeah.
door.
Well, Pat tells me she used to drive your accordion around, Martin.
Oh, many times.
It was.
Well, there weren't very many people with a car that time, and like I said, I overloaded it the times I could get it.
People traveled by streetcar.
Yeah, in the streetcar.
We used to run.
And you know what? Con was saying that he was, you know, the Sullivan brothers, Con, they couldn't be here today, and his brother, but they loved dancing.
Yeah.
And he said he used to go with your sister Mary, and they actually taught dancing for one of the dance school like downtown Minneapolis, and they'd take the streetcar down and.
They did.
Yeah.
But we used to, from the university hall, we would run over to Marshall, so we didn't have to pay the extra dime to go into Minneapolis.
You tell
Yeah.
kids that nowadays.
Imagine that.
Well, I want to make sure we have a little time for a few tunes, but can we give a hand to these amazing guests? Thanks so much, Pat. Thanks to the Morans, thanks to Brady. We're going to just put 3 chairs up here. We're going to have a few tunes from Martin and his friends Doc and Laura. And then we don't have to rush out here either after that. We can hang out and have a little bit of a chat. I would invite everybody to look around the room at the pictures if you're interested, and make sure we finish all the tea.
Yes. the stage going boss and Pat.
Did you do the waltz with the song?
I will give it a whirl.
Give it a whirl.
That's most of the words.
say thanks so much to the people that shared stories and photos, and yeah, hang out and have a chat if you'd like. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks. I really enjoyed this a lot. So, thanks.